All right. Well, welcome. We're going to get started today. It is great to have everyone here. We are excited to be bringing you some new conversation and some in-depth viewpoints, I think, from our group. I want to give a special thank you to DegreeSight for sponsoring and EDU Policy AI. Dr. David Hatami is with us today with me, and we're going to roll into our conversation here now. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows if you have questions, there's a Q&A function. Please drop those in. We've got our folks on the other end monitoring that, and we will have some time at the end to make sure that we cover good conversations, good things that are going on. If you have questions, please drop them in. If we don't get to all of them today, we'll make sure that we do some follow-up with you as well. So we appreciate those questions. We appreciate this conversation. And it is not the easiest conversation to have, is it, Dr. Itami?
No, not always. That's correct.
Yes. When we first started this conversation a number of months ago, you and I looked at each other and went, wow, this should be the next series in our webinar. And I thought, yeah, that is absolutely the case. So we kind of pulled our heads together and schemed up some great talking points and some good conversation today. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we will get started with what we got today. So, all right. Okay, there. Hope everyone can see my screen. And we'll get started with that. There we go. All right. I hope you can see the screen today. That is the beginning of our presentation. We will make sure that we recorded this, and folks will be getting a copy of this if they've registered, both of the video as well as the slide presentation that we have here. And again, brought to you by DegreeSight and edupolicy.ai. So thanks for coming. We're glad you're here today, and I hope this is going to be some valuable information for you. Dr. David Hatami, please go ahead, give some words of your background. I find it fascinating, and I'd love to hear a little bit more as you do some introductions of yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. My name is Dr. David Hatami. I am an academic. I've been in higher education my entire career, spent most of it as a dean. Believe it or not, I started all the way in admissions many years ago and effectively worked my way through the ranks of higher education, starting on the staff side, flipping over to faculty side, and then working my way up from there. I love higher ed, and I understand every single part of it, and I'm really excited today to be able to get to work, with Jay and DegreeSight to, talk a little bit more about this really important part of the process where, where the registrar's office comes in. So it's really exciting to be here. So thank you for the opportunity, Jay.
Great to have you, David. So this is the next in the series, in the learning series at DegreeSight. Our learning series started a few months ago, actually, with a look from Dr. Nathan Graw and looking at the environment, the demographic cliff, the demand cliff, the challenges that we're facing that are here right now. And then we brought in Scott Jeffy, and in our second part, we talked about the 38 million prospective students that are what we call some credit, no college degree. And we talked about that giant audience. And we had the discussions on how to reach that audience. And then this one was kind of a natural output of that. So if we have this environment and we have this audience, how in the world can we facilitate, operationalize, create some solutions? And as David and I began this conversation, we thought AI's got to be part of this. AI has to be part of what we're talking about. So if you want more information on this, we have our learning series includes webinars like this, blogs, articles, and the Transfer Talk podcast, which is where really David and I got to know each other, is in that podcast. We've had a
I
couple of
was
episodes.
just going to say, don't forget the podcast because they're like episodes of Click and Clack. It's good stuff.
It is, and it's been a lot of fun. So there's good conversations being had kind of throughout the space. Um, so as we begin what we're our a conversation today, we want to set the stage of what this is all about. And so um, the conversation started with this idea that there's this pipeline of students with credits, and how do we manage them? And David, I'm going to tee you up here. Go
Yeah,
ahead, have set the stage for us.
absolutely. Well, and I think you and I have had this conversation many times that the transfer student is sort of the unsung hero of the admissions process.
Yeah.
And I think, the registrar's team, is the one that really manages that piece more so than admissions, ironically, on a lot of levels, because there is always this question of, like, what credits can I get? I took these courses years ago, but is that really going to do me any good today if I want to get a degree? And helping students go through that process is what it takes to get to make up for that attrition loss that we have in the enrollment and the academic cycles. So this is why this is such a critical piece of this puzzle. And being able to address that, it solves a lot of institutional issues. And I think that is what really fascinated me about the conversations that I would have with Jay on our Transfer Talk podcast. It's like, yeah, this really is sort of a piece that doesn't get the attention or the credit that it really deserves because everybody's always talking about admissions, but who's really talking about transfers? So I think that's where this really comes into play.
Yeah. And as we move through this conversation, one of the things that we'll continue to wrestle with is this idea of the dilution or the expansion of the term transfer. A number of years ago, we would have said, I know what a transfer is because I know what it's not. But there's so many students that are graduating high school with dual enrollment credits that transfers operationally look very similar to brand new high school graduates or 30 or 40 or 50-year-old dormant degree seekers that are coming back. They have this large amount of credit and they need to do something with it. They need to understand, will my college take this credit? How long will it take me to graduate and get a degree? And how much is it going to cost? And we have some data points that are, I think, particularly interesting. Um, you can read through these, but 37% of all undergraduates nationwide have transferred at least once. More than a third of the students are transferring, but 43% of them are credits are being lost. Now those are startling data points, but the next two are for me preliminary the function that we're going to be talking about today, and the days to evaluation, the frustration to evaluation. And David, you and I talk about it all the time.
Yes.
Amazon time is what is expected now for students to get their responses. They expect a response back from, if it's Amazon or whoever they're working with and having an engagement with, particularly even a college, but 14 days to evaluate a transcript. And that, I mean, frankly, I've seen a lot of colleges that are 14 weeks or once or twice a year they do it, but that leads to that last segment. And 68% students say they're frustrated with this process. And David, I want to hear from you on this point. Student success starts when you start the conversation, not
It's
when they enroll.
it starts well before that. They do want Amazon yesterday. They don't want Amazon today. They want Amazon yesterday. And this is part of the tech cycle and the tech culture that we live in when consumers are starting to realize that organizations should be able to respond fast to their queries. And in all honesty, we live in the age of TikTok. And that means they have about a 30-second attention span if you're lucky on a good day. And as institutions of higher learning, we're all notorious for being as what's the saying I like to say? It's as like molasses in a Maine winter, right? And traditionally we are slow at doing everything. And I think institutions are starting to wake up to the fact that we have to start being quicker. We have to adapt. And this is not optional anymore. This is about institutional survival because we have demographic cliffs. We have a generation that doesn't see the value of a college education. They don't want the debt. They say, well, why do I need that? I can go into tech and make millions and I don't need a college degree. Or I have ChatGPT for all the answers. So why would I even bother to go to college?
Right.
This is what the admissions management, enrollment management is facing. But the team in the registrar's office is kind of facing a parallel challenge of, if we're going to get these transfer students admitted to the institution, what are we going to do to improve our process? How are we going to make this better institutionally at scale in a way that we can manage, in a way that it's still organizationally possible? And that is without adding staff. That's the other caveat. It's like, how do you balance all this to make this equation work?
Absolutely. And it's got to be operational. I don't think I've heard anybody in the past 2, 3 years that is saying, oh, no, we're going to be hiring and increasing our staff size to manage this. So the bottleneck, the overload is on the same people or in a collapsing staff size. And that's the conundrum, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not feasible. I mean, even with the best of intentions and the best, most organized systems, you're not going to be able to manage the bottleneck on top of all of the other day-to-day responsibilities. It's not logistically or humanly possible.
So,
And this is where tech comes in. This is where
yeah.
we can make a difference.
So let's talk for a minute about why. Why hasn't this happened in the past? Why do students with credit fall kind of into the margins and not necessarily into the priority? Most schools will see there's problems with academic control or academic self-importance. I don't want to take classes from those colleges because we do it better, or that didn't meet up to my expectation, and so I don't want those classes. And so they avoid the whole evaluation process and building momentum. But even deeper, there has been historically a problem with seeing transfers as a priority and getting
Mhm.
first resource as opposed to last resource. And there's a number of reasons for that. There's reasons that they don't stay at colleges. I've heard this from presidents. Well, they don't stay at our college for 4 years. They're only here for 2. And they take the most expensive courses. They're in the top upper level courses and they're taking the expensive courses. So therefore we don't give them as much financial aid because they're more expensive to educate. But then you also have this misunderstanding that they are not loyal alumni, that they don't necessarily give and they don't continue to provide resources for the university. They don't increase or impact the academic reputation like that high school student does. And they're very difficult to find and they are very unpredictable. I've heard all of those reasons why transfers or students with credit just really are not our focus and our focal point, but never waste a good crisis, right?
Absolutely not. And here's the thing, it's also about resource allocation. Okay. We need to make sure from an institutional perspective that we are utilizing all of our resources to the maximum capacity in every department. And I think, there's not one university or college president that's not going to tell you to use what we got, to use what we have. But if there's things that we can do that will flip the paradigm, that will change the leverage, they're always open to talk about it because they know that it's small details can literally flip the script and they can make all the difference in the world because we're on razor thin enrollment budgets here. It's like, making those numbers are really critical from an institutional perspective.
And likewise, the expansion of dual enrollment, whether colleges are focusing on recruiting transfers or not, the operational challenges are on them. They are upon them. And so at this point, Students that are coming in from high school, brand new graduate out of high school, got their diploma. They're coming in with 1, 2 years of
Mhm.
college credit. They look operationally a lot like those students that are coming in from a community college or coming in from another university or another college uh, after high school graduation. They look
Yeah,
very much the same with all of those evaluations and all of those operational challenges that are sitting behind them.
yeah, yeah. It is about finding a way. And I think, it's something that we all think about, what can I do in my day-to-day routine? If I change just one thing or change two things, what would give me the biggest return on my investment of time, energy, and effort, that would equal out to the greatest output for
Mhm.
my department, for the institution? And sometimes just finding those opportunities are half of the challenge. And then once we find them, we have to find a way to make them actually pragmatic and make them effective. Um, what I found is when it comes to transfer students, they have so many other things going on in their lives that they have, I kind of talked about the TikTok generation. They have, going back to school is kind of a fleeting thought for them. And if
Mhm.
you don't capture it right when they're hot to trot, as they say,
Mhm.
you could very easily miss out on that potential student, not only A, going back to school, but or losing them to another institution altogether who was able to respond faster. It's not uncommon. I've worked in admissions long enough, for enough years to know that, students apply to multiple institutions at the same time. And
Mhm.
there is a little bit of institutional roulette that goes on here too. So they're like, okay, I'm going to apply to five. These two are my top choices, but I'm going to kind of hedge my bets and see which ones I apply to. And if they're applying as transfer students, being the college or university that is able to respond the quickest. And that was a big deal in the admissions department, is being able to respond to that inquiry with lightning speed. I mean, we're
Mhm.
talking like 30 seconds after they hit click and they click the button. That was our goal, is to be calling them that fast to make sure that we could at least get them while that energy was hot, while they were really ready to have that conversation, because it's very easy for them just to push go to voicemail or just decline and not take that call and not talk to an institution. And what happens is not only does the student miss out on the opportunity to go back to school, but the institution misses out on the opportunity to enroll that student. So that's why speed matters. That's why scale matters.
Right. And if we're relying on manual processes, as we talked about, speed is almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Speed is impossible because I need inputs from people all over the campus and they respond. And frankly, it's unfair because folks go on vacation. They take the day off. They're swamped with emails. They can't get back to you right away. And those are the reasonable responses. The other ones are,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to get to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, unless there is an automation behind this, unless there's a technology behind this, and I love the last line on this slide, it's not just an operational headache. I think a lot of us have over the years seen this. Well, this is battlefields. We just don't want to do this. What a headache this operation is. The way you said it here, it's a strategic vulnerability that undermines institutional competitiveness and mission delivery. I think that is absolutely
Yeah,
the core of
hands
this.
down.
If you're going to enroll these students, if you're going to be strategic about how you are going to enroll and recruit, this has to be a part of it. Um, as we break down these workflows, the manual workflows are fundamentally incompetent for growth goals. And we talk about this imbalance, the imbalance of we need more students or we need to serve students better. That's the lift. But
Yes.
then it's on the back of people, of static staff that have limitations, that all the processes have limitations to them. And so how in the world are you going to lift more with same staff or fewer staff and get better? So we're talking student services, student service, student success, models, appreciation for and satisfaction with the process for students before they even begin. And that leads to enrollment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You'd mentioned the student process starts before they ever enroll. You know, those course descriptions. Let's talk about those for a minute because I've been through as an undergraduate, I went through the transfer process myself twice actually. And from every institution, there was this process of, well, I'm going to have to go back to find their course catalog, read the very specific fine print on what they covered, what they didn't cover, and then I'm going to compare it, to mine to see if there's at least an 80%, coverage, 80 to 100% of they're the same thing.
Mm.
And many times, I can actually recall from a personal experience, I lost out on the ability to transfer a course. And sometimes they would just give it as a gen ed, but they wouldn't give it towards a very specific major. And these are the decisions that really are very important to the student stakeholder. These are the ones that are ultimately going to be a part of their ultimate decision-making process and final decision in which institution they enroll with. It was not uncommon for me, when I was working in admissions for them to say, yeah, I'd call the student and say, well, are you ready to move forward? They're like, no, the other school gave me more transfer credits. And this is like happened a lot. It was like one of the buckets that we would check as to why they
Mhm.
didn't enroll. This other schools, they took more of my transfer credits, so I'm going to go with them because it's an easier path to graduation. And, that was real. And it was very hard to rebut from an admissions perspective. It's like, no, I really think you should be in school longer, spend more money and come here. It's hard to tell a student that if you're going to say it with any sense of being genuine towards them and their needs and what's important to them, without being, disrespectful to your own institution.
Mhm.
So, being able to give students the ability to say, hey, you know what, we were able to get through your courses quicker. We were able to make a decision faster as to what we can and what we can't, to give you the tools to make your decision as to what institution you think is right for you. We hope it's ours, but this should give you a very clear snapshot on Amazon yesterday time, as to if this is a good fit, if this is going to work for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm going to tee this up because Gina asked a question on online here, and it led into perfectly into this slide, and that is, she says, I think there's a disconnect or a misunderstanding perhaps between transferability of credit and which degree requirements are being met specifically using my credit. In other words, I've got this class, and for this program, it comes in for this one. For this
Mhm,
program, it comes in for something different. This one's a gen ed. This one's just a general
mhm.
elective. So there are differences with how those are met. And she says, I think institutions need to be transparent, sharing this information with applicants, and equivalency systems need to be able to detail this information. And that's the first point we make on this slide.
100%.
Transparent decision logic is critical for that student because it's not just the accumulation of credits, it's the accumulation and sorting of the right credits, right?
What we don't want is the traditional AI black box. I'm
Right.
familiar with the black box puzzle. For those that aren't, essentially it means you put data in, it goes into a black box that nobody can see the decision-making process, and it just makes an answer. It gives you an output, gives you an answer, but there's no explanation as to why or how the technology arrived at that question. And that's problematic, even from the standpoint of ethical AI. That's one of the biggest fundamental things to look for when you're looking at platforms that aren't being ethical, is that they're not transparent. And when you are able to offer that very specific transparency in the technology that you're using, what you're doing is you're empowering the user to understand the logic that the institution is using. And
Mhm.
so there's a peace of mind in that. Even if you don't agree with or don't care for the outcome, at least you understand how they came about that decision. How many times have we all clicked on, filled out some form, and you hit submit, and it says, thank you for your response. We'll send you a letter within 7 to 15 business days, with our decision. And it's like, no, they don't want that. They want to know immediately, and they want to know exactly what the institution was thinking. That's how you win trust with students.
Yes, and I think you bring up a great point. The patience of a consumer audience today is a
Non-existent.
hummingbird.
It's
It
non-existent.
and they remember, don't they? They remember who went fast. They remember who answered the questions. 10 times faster evaluations, AI processes transcript in minutes instead of days. In fact, I would say that that's probably even giving it a little bit more. It's seconds instead of days. But
Yeah.
there are still colleges that would say, oh, well, they'll wait for me. I'll get it back to them. And, when I can, we have a lot of registration on campus going on. We're not going to be able to get to the prospective students because the current students are a priority. So I have to choose between the two, and current students are paying the tuition. So future students, really not yet. So they're choosing those and they're putting off future enrollment, but they're not putting them off and they're not so that they're waiting for them. They're putting them off and saying, you need to go someplace else because that's the way the students are taking it.
Yeah, I went to a very small private liberal arts for my undergrad. In fact, the school was so small that they literally knew every student's name when you walked into the registrar's office.
That's small.
It was small enough, but yet big enough, and a
Yeah.
very good school though. And there was something I remember it distinctly, and I remember kind of going on what you just said there. We will get to them when we can,
Yeah.
even when you have like amazing customer service. I'm just going to call it that for the lack of a better term, of
Mhm.
student service. Even if you have that, even if the intent is to get to those transfer students as quickly as possible, it's not always feasible. And that's that's the dichotomy where we miss out is not only just the difference between the intent and what we can actually reasonably deliver as just human beings doing our best at our jobs. So that's where the technology can come to sort of kind of help mitigate some of those factors.
And I think you're leading into this next part of the conversation, and that is the scary part of change. This idea that change, we can manage change, but we're managing it not with people and training. We're managing with people and training and technology that is a little bit vague, foggy, changing constantly. There's a fear factor involved in this. So not only do people are people allergic to change oftentimes, and I've been at institutions, I've been around institutions. Change is a bad word. We don't like change. But then on top of that, you add the solution is something we don't completely understand and completely trust, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to say, and I think we had this conversation before. It's the reliability of the answers that I get from the technology. That's the other critical piece. It's like you can have good tech, you can have a solution, but is it going to be reliable and consistent?
Mm.
And that's really, like I know as an administrator, if I'm weighing a system that I'm going to implement in my institution, that I have to know that this is reliable and consistent on top of everything else. Change I can work with, I can manage, I can work my way through it, but I don't want to be put in a position where, I make a recommendation on something and then it's not consistent. So that's sort of why it's so important that the technology can deliver that as well.
And honestly, you mentioned it. It's the bottom line. The underpinning of all of this is, can I trust it? Can I
Mhm.
trust what's happening? And from a dean's perspective, you understand the expertise of faculty, the expertise of those teaching these subjects that feel like I trust the research, I trust my subject area, I trust my ability to convey and teach and build upon my subject. But yet you're going to push this technology in that I don't know much about, and frankly, I don't trust it yet.
Yeah, and the thing about, the new AI technologies, and I'm going to use that term kind of in a general sense, all right? Um, there's a lot happening very fast, and it's very reasonable to have concerns. I think the AI literacy trend is going up. Institutions and individuals, especially in various professions, are really starting to embrace the technology more and more. And I think one of the common questions is, well, what if something changes in the technology? And the best part is if it changes the technology, at this point, it's only going to be better and more reliable. So, recognizing that we are at a place where there is enough reliability and consistency in the technology that is presently available that it can make for sound academic decisions.
Yeah. And from your perspective, faculty involvement, engagement, day one is critical. Decision makers, transcript evaluators, all are part of this. And when you bring in this aspect, it's not simply an enrollment function. In
Mhm.
fact, it's in some ways it's an enrollment advantage, but it's an academic function, it's an IT function, it's accreditation functions
Function.
that are
Yeah.
all a part of this conversation that lend itself to, I think, schools stalling out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, uh, I want to talk a little bit about articulation agreements because I really think that that is a very, very critical piece of this, especially for the registrar's office. I remember working as a dean in a community college, and I wrote the articulation agreement for the local four-year institution that was just down the road. I wrote them. I'm the one who, coordinated with all of the department chairs and built it for this community college system. And, I'm here to tell you that the significance of these institutions being aligned with one another is critical because,
Mm.
when you're talking about institutions that are, basically, for lack of a better term, a feeder school, say you have a smaller community college that's feeding into a larger four-year school or a university system, there has to be that alignment. And, we are at a place now from a technology perspective where my job would have been a lot easier if we would have had this technology then instead of having to do it, where they say the old fashioned way, manually, where literally going line by line through course catalogs, having multiple iterations and conversations with department chairs to make sure that I understood the contextual nuances of what they were trying to articulate. It would have been so much easier. But now it's, these things are getting to a point where they can be, I'm not going to say completely, but
Mhm.
semi or virtually automated in a way that is seamless for students.
Right. And folks, as we have on the slide here, folks need to have weigh-in. They need to have buy-in. They need to have parts of this conversation that are meaningful to them. And when you look at there aren't many, from my perspective as someone who's been around higher education, there aren't many solutions, there aren't many problems to fix that sit like this, that are in the middle of academics and enrollment management, which honestly, let's throw athletics in there. Let's throw any other co-curricular activities that are recruiting students in there.
Yeah.
Um, Finance and budget absolutely have a stake in this. They're all stakeholders, but academic affairs, information technology, all of those have a stake in this, and they all need to be at the table. And there needs to be a negotiator, a diplomat, or a series of diplomats, a team of diplomats to bring
Yes.
everybody together, right?
100%. And you know, there's there's so many different ways, there's so many different things that can go wrong if people aren't communicating. And by having an infrastructure that allows for the kind of communication that we need, it starts to eliminate those problems, that were, commonplace in the past and replace them with efficiency in ways that, we're only beginning to understand and explore.
Right. I think it's critical though. So I'm going to go back to the problem that many colleges have, and that is sustainable pipelines, but
Mhm.
also the shifting of the pipelines they already have.
Mhm.
So I've talked to many schools that have wait lists that aren't heavy trying to recruit more students, but the students that they have are coming in with many more credits. They're coming in
Yes.
with operational challenges that are completely blowing up their processes, and they're losing students, even though they are those high reputation, those selective schools. They're still seeing some of the same problems. So it's not simply a recruitment, it's a management and a student service, a student success problem.
Yeah, and it also becomes about, not once the students are enrolled and matriculate, there's about managing that population through graduation. And doing this right is, with the technology is how you get there.
Right. When you've been on campuses talking about with AI, you are one of the preeminent voices on campus talking about AI ethics and policy. Um, you created this slide and you're talking about the red flags that you see in here and the green flags you see in here. Talk
Mhm.
about the management of those. Talk about the diplomacy of those.
Yeah, there's very much of a delicate balance in a sense between the technology and human in the loop, right? Everybody has this assumption that AI is strictly mechanical and that it's strictly in the world of IT and coding and developers. There's a lot more human interaction and human hands in the AI process than a lot of people actually realize. And that's actually a good thing
Mhm.
because, we all hear these Terminator stories and this, crazy stuff, and to a certain extent, I can kind of understand it, but at the same time, you have to recognize that, you know, in order for any technology to work, there has to be checks and balances. It's much like our government system. There's checks and balances, one
Mhm.
system being checked by another and balanced by another. And with the point being that we are here to speed up a process, make it more efficient, and also, to be able to do it at scale, being able to do those things, but at the same time, maintaining the ethical standards that we need, maintaining integrity, maintaining the transparency, the bias, the fairness, all of these, issues that, because every time you add a new layer of technology, there's a new layer of risk. And
Mhm.
the only way to manage that is to manage the risk as the technology grows, instead of trying to fix it all at once by putting a big band-aid. No, you build it into the system. And when organizations and systems do that, that's how they are able to maintain those ethical boundaries, to be compliant, for obvious reasons, to make sure that they are serving their student stakeholders, and they're also optimizing ROI for their institution. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
icing on the cake. Because if you can give your stakeholders everything they need in spades and still save your department revenue, like cost, expenditures, well, then that's like a no-brainer on any day of the week.
Right. And when I look at these two lists, these two columns, I see the brake pedal and I see the gas pedal.
Gas.
And I've come from the enrollment background, and I'm all gas. I'm very little brake. I'm just let's go. Enrollment people are that way because they look at it and they go, "This is going to be an advantage. Let's just find out. Let's go." There are other folks on campus that are a lot more brake than gas. A lot of times they fall into those categories of finance, where they fall into categories of academic affairs. As
Yes.
you've gone into colleges and universities around the world, are you seeing that same kind of mentality? There's a hesitancy to lift off the brake because we don't know, we don't want to go fast, or because we
A-
don't trust going fast.
Academia never wants to change.
Right.
They just don't. Because anybody in higher education, we are a traditionalist because that is a system in which we were were raised and that we've gone through. And what's happened is literally in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, everything that we fundamentally knew about the higher education industry, along with many other industries, I might add, verticals, it's literally flipped on its head overnight. And the one who's really experiencing that is academics, right? You have students using ChatGPT to write their English papers, and to do their outlines and everything that would actually require hours and hours of work. But we're not talking about that today. Today we're talking about this transfer credit piece. And now, with that same speed and what we were talking about earlier, the Amazon yesterday, uh, that is what students expect, and that is how we need to be able to deliver to them while still maintaining consistency and accuracy. But to answer your question, Jay, you know academia doesn't want to change, but they are also recognizing very quickly that they have to change quickly if they want to become competitive. Because, I think I read a statistic that, colleges, this was like a year ago, were closing at the rate of one a day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, because I remember years and years ago looking at one of those, was it Peterson guides, with all the colleges. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking to myself, like, how can a nation sustain so many institutions? Right. I mean, it takes a tremendous economic volume to maintain this. And we've been seeing that there is that attrition that's happening. Old institutions are closing because of financial issues and student attrition and what have you, but they weren't also taking advantage of what's available to them.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point that as you mentioned this idea that there's an aversion to using AI within a classroom. So faculty, and this is a double-edged sword,
Right.
because in the workplace, I think our graduates all need to have a very good understanding of the utility of AI. And I'm
Mhm.
using AI in this very broad term.
Broad contextually.
And I think
Yes.
that might be one of the biggest problems, is that all of that is lumped into what we're talking about now. It's not differentiated. It's not seen as an advantage. It's seen as a cheat. It's
Mhm.
we every all AI
Yes.
is cheating, and the academic mindset is we got to do the hard work and do the things that we need to do because we don't want to teach shortcuts. We don't want to teach that cheating mindset. Well, that's the risk and misunderstanding of AI that I believe that so many schools need to get into these conversations to understand what is it that we're really using in these systems? What are we using for credit valuations? What are we using for data management? But they're seeing it as no, it's all the same, and it's not.
No, no, it's not. And the one thing that I could say is if we can utilize technology to make our lives better and to automate the pieces of our day that really need automation, because doing something by rote for its own sake does not make any sense. It really doesn't. But if we can, as long as there is a management tool, the ability to manage what the systems are doing, and it is accurate, and it is speeding up the process from the position of efficiency, then why not embrace the technologies and really try to figure out how and why I can use this for my institution? And it's only going to make my day better. So why wouldn't I give it a try?
I think one of the things that we continue to talk about is the process. So I think honestly, a roadmap and understanding of this isn't going to be a jump into the deep end of the pool of all AI. Let's just throw it out there. We're going to lose
Yes, correct.
all control and all human engagement in this. Let's walk in slowly and
Mhm.
start with a very structured process implementation of what is it we're trying to fix? What are we trying to solve? Where are we trying to land in this?
Agreed. One of my favorite sayings or favorite quotes about AI, it's by Dr. Andrew Ng. He's the Stanford computer science professor. He's the founder of Coursera. And he talks about AI as the new electricity.
Yeah.
And I love that quote because it analogizes so well exactly what we're experiencing on so many levels. I mean, imagine AI as this ambiguous term, right? Like the electricity running in the walls of our homes and our offices and stores, but it has no value until you take an appliance and you plug it into the wall. You plug that lamp into the wall. You plug the computer into the wall, the hair dryer, whatever it is, and all of a sudden that kind of that power that is sort of ubiquitous kind of all of a sudden has a very focused ability to deliver a very specific function. And that's kind of what this is we've found a way to essentially tap into the code or the algorithm and create a process out of what's out there and what's available.
Right. And as we've talked to the colleges over the months and years that are coming that have happened over the past couple of years, and AI has evolved. Um, the process to build the assessment, to understand and identify those things that are problematic, those things that we're trying to fix, understanding those things, and not seeing them as sacred, not seeing them as those are the things we do not touch. We don't touch those policies, those procedures,
Mhm.
because they started in 1971 when so and so was on campus, and we just leave them alone. But
Mhm.
to really get our hands around and understand those identify those bottlenecks, those
Yeah.
issues that are on our campus, but then to build pilot programs, um, pilot programs that really are small, that are scaled to a problem and not to the whole university to start with. Um, but to start in earnest into small things. And what we've seen, credit evaluation can be one of those. So this idea of credit evaluation and immediacy to that's oftentimes a pilot program. But then bring that back to faculty, right? And faculty need to be engaged. You said this earlier, they need to be engaged.
Yes.
Validation of this, faculty have to bless it.
Agreed. Agreed. And one thing I probably should have said this in the beginning of the presentation, but when it comes to AI needs a problem statement to really be successful. And it kind of goes back to that analogy I used of it being the new electricity. Well, your problem statement is, specifically around how do we improve our metrics when it comes to transfer students. Once you have a problem statement, then it's much simpler to start to that's when the AI really shows its power and it can really craft a very specific bespoke solution to a very specific problem that it's trying to help you solve. And you're right, all of the stakeholders do need to be involved in this. I say this when it comes to building an institutional AI policy. I want the naysayers. I want the people who don't agree with it at the roundtables. I want the faculty who are like, I'm not using AI in my classroom. Those are the ones I want present, because you need those voices of dissent to recognize the value of what you have, because when they recognize it, then you have true institutional buy-in.
Mhm.
And there'll always be somebody who will resist change, but by resisting change, you're resisting survival of tomorrow. And it really has become what's the word, existentialist in that
Mm.
regard.
Yeah.
It is about existence. And it's crazy how far it's gone, but it's real. And by being able to manage the specific components of the admissions and the transfer process, it can literally turn an institution around in a very short time.
Right. And I think that and moving into our next slide here, there's misunderstanding of AI in a number of ways. One, it falls into this idea that it is flashy, cool, um, and how functional is it? And in fact, this is leading to the question. We got a question online. There are some very cool AI tools, and there are some AI relevant tools. How do you differentiate the cool from the useful AI in higher education? And I think that's a really that's an important distinction, because you have to differentiate the flash, the shiny objects, the cool
Yeah,
stuff,
it's
the
real.
videos, the videos
It's
and all
real.
from data management and OCR transcript engines, and being able to use it as not just a flash, not just a fun, shiny object, but actually as a machine, as a tool that will help operations.
The irony is, the more boring it is, the more effective it probably is.
Right?
Because
Yeah.
if it's solving a problem, it's gonna, after you kind of understand it, it's gonna get pretty humdrum. Let's just
Yeah.
face it. Because
Right.
what that means is it's actually solving the problem, instead of trying to impress you and razzle dazzle you with flashy screens and videos and little pop-ups here. I mean, that stuff's all great, if you're trying to do a little show and tell. But if you're trying to solve a real institutional problem, something that is literally constricting the lifeblood of an institution,
Right.
you need something that just works. And I think if you have something that just works and you have a technology that solves a real pain point, a legitimate pain point, then that's how you can tell the difference between cool and effective.
I totally agree. And oftentimes in conversations we have this idea that we need to show the database. We need to show how data moves from one place to another. That's some of the most boring things
Mhm.
you can be a part of. And being able, but folks understand how important it is. They understand that there are bottlenecks that can be created by moving data from one place to another and responding to students incorrectly, prospective students or current students, or using information incorrectly. So data is really important, but it's
Yeah,
not about being very flashy and cool. It's about being right, trusted, accurate, and transparent with students. And I think that's the target, and not necessarily fun, cool, and flashy. That we need to look at accurate, transparent, and right, and immediate and fast.
and does it solve my problem?
Does it solve
I
the
mean,
problem?
you can literally summarize it, but you're absolutely everything you said is right, Jay. Solve the problem that we have. And, so let's define our problem statement. I have more students seeking transfer evaluations than I have, institutional manpower to do in a timely and efficient manner. I mean, it's very, very straightforward. And when you are able to solve that problem, you are going to be, the admissions department's best friend.
Yeah.
Because, I can't tell you, again, from when I was working in admissions, when I started in higher ed all those years ago, that was on many, many an enrollment, that was the linchpin as to, whether I would be able to enroll that student, no matter what else I did right. It didn't matter. It was, is the student going to be happy with the process? And then are they going to get what they want out of the process and be given accurate and correct information for them to make a realistic decision for their educational path?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The way that you said that is there's an understanding, the underpinning, there's an understanding that we need to serve students better, and that's a problem,
Yeah,
right? It's the acceptance that what we're doing now isn't serving students well. What we're doing now is slow, in that faster is better, and that getting faster is a problem. Um, those schools that we work with, those schools that are embracing this technology and AI in this space, just the simple credit evaluation space, are seeing enormous changes with that student success, that student satisfaction, students coming in and understanding, how am I going to graduate? How long does it take? We've used this analogy a number of times.
yeah,
I've used
yeah,
this, and that is a degree is a marathon, 26.2 miles. And 26.2 miles is from beginning to end. But the problem is most students aren't starting at the beginning. A lot of students now are starting at mile 3 or mile 5 or mile 7 or mile 10. And that's where they start, but they don't have 26.2 miles to race. They have 16.2 miles. This idea that here's my credits, this is how long it's going to take for me to finish this race, which is different than the other person next to me. I
yeah.
need to be able to tell them, as a good service provider, this is your race. These are the credits that are coming in. This is what you need to do, and I need to do it fast.
Yeah. I have a prediction that I want to make. All right. We all know, from an economic perspective, what's going on in the workplace and the job force. It's brutal out there. And traditionally, higher education starts to boom when there are in difficult economic times. And with that boom that I am going to project for higher education enrollments, I'm going to also project a increase in the number of applicants with transfer credits that who finally decided I need to go back to get this degree. I have these dormant credits. I want to
Yeah.
know what, and for an institution to be ready for that kind of, future for understanding what the future is going to bring, sort of be prepared for that. It speaks volumes about an institution to recognize that as well.
Yeah. Well, uh, David, we're running right on the end of time here. So I
Oh,
appreciate all of our attendees. Thank you for hanging with us today. We're going to have available the slide deck as well as the video. And I would encourage those folks that are receiving that, begin to pass that on across your campus. Begin to start these conversations. If you haven't started them already, begin to start these conversations because they take time. Change management takes time. Embracing technology and understanding it takes time. So we are fully aware of that, and we're here to help you if you need help. DegreeSight is here. David, you are a national speaker on policy on AI, and so you are the person they can bring in to start messing around with this idea of how to use AI on campus. So I encourage
absolutely.
I encourage
And
folks that are having that question too, contact David.
thank you. Yes, anything around AI literacy, AI policy, AI ethics, more than happy to have that conversation with yourself or your institution. Looking forward
Uh,
to hearing from you.
Outstanding. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great Thanksgiving coming up and a great holiday season. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here.